And welcome to another exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us. I'm your host, Michael. And before I introduce my truly amazing guest, I do have a two-part little announcement to make. And that is for all of my guests who are used to watching me on X, I do not have the premium account. So X has removed the ability to go live and live stream there. So unfortunately, we will not be airing live to X anymore. However, LinkedIn does allow for live streaming, so we are now live streaming there. So we are just switching over to a new platform. So sorry to see you go, X. And if you change your policy, let us know. We'll be happy to air back on your platform. And thank you to LinkedIn for letting us live stream. Now, with the boring homework out of the way, I now have the honor, privilege, and blessing to introduce you all to my amazing guest, whose story is so unique. I truly do not feel I could do it justice, so I want her to introduce herself. I give you one, the only, Ginette Matacia Lucas.
Hi everybody. Hi. So, do you want me to introduce myself? Is that what you'd like?
Please, because you have such a vivid background. I don't think I can do it justice.
Okay, so I'll just do a quick wrap up. But I'm the daughter of Louis Matacia, the famous dowser, and he worked for the federal government and several different agencies on locating missing objects. And he also worked with the military. He was very well known for training and instructing the military on using dowsing to locate booby traps and bombs during the Vietnam era. And down the road, he got to meet a lot of senators and congressmen and recommended different ways and approaches with the paranormal to help protect America. So he stuck mostly to dowsing, but he learned the plethora of the voice phenomenon. And you can say ghost hunting or investigations, but they used different equipment back then in the 60s, and it was very, very similar. I guess you call it white noise or whatever. So I remember being 6 and 7 years old, and he used all these wild pieces of equipment. So I learned about it early on. And then he got to meet all these wonderful people at different conferences. And so I was very impacted by these unusual weirdos, which was great, really great. And then eventually I had some experiences. So that's what we're going to cover tonight. My weird experiences and how it influenced my work, and then how it escalated my work. And I tell people, pay attention, because each age range I had increased different knowledge. And it's like reading a book. Oh my gosh, all of a sudden you can look at yourself and say, oh, I have that ability too, or I remember that. A lot of people just don't pay attention, and I think that's why I'm fortunate to be able to be highly accurate. So that gives you a general perspective. So basically, after all the many years of my experiences, I was able to interview and meet with the FBI on missing persons. So I work on true crime cases from homicide to missing. I got to meet with regular police. When I say regular police, typically the standard cop, hi, how are you? The nice ones most of the time. They were still skeptical, which was good. And I worked on both homicide and missing person. And then I got to work with the detectives, who are a lot more open. Then additionally, I got into treasure hunting and became very successful at treasure hunting. People are going to say, oh my God, treasure hunting, I don't get it. So you take your psychic work and you apply it to locating treasure, and period. And so I found treasure. And almost a lot of the products or projects I worked on just escalated and went in a really good direction. And I met lots of wonderful people at different conferences. So I'm watching the conferences coming up this coming year, and I think we're just going to see more and more really good conferences. Originally, they were just the paranormal, but we're going to see so many good topics come up and platforms come up. So I think people are going to get better at their escalating psychic ability. So I'm not a healer. So people say, hey, if you had that ability, I probably do have the ability to heal, but it doesn't interest me, and I don't want to be arrested for healing somebody, or the thought of, or the intent. So what else do I work on? So people are unaware of the fact that I've been written up in the Smithsonian Magazine for locating 2 missing objects. I'm in the Psychology Today article by Maureen Seaberg on locating treasure. I'm in books, written up on books. A lot of the times, a lot of the articles are written up either Ginette Matacia Lucas or Ginette Lucas. So if you try to find me, I'm out there. If you Google just psychic Ginette Matacia, so be it. The one that keeps popping up the most, as you well know, is the Casey Anthony case. A lot of people did not know I also worked on the Chandra Levy case and pinpointed an area where she could be found. And we'll get into that in more detail. So you're on. That gives people a general idea.
No, and that's incredible. I mean, what a gift to have all of that access and be able to turn around and use it, and to use it for good and not use it for, like, I know some people would say for like profit and, just to better yourself. No, you in turn said, no, I'm going to use it to help others. And I'll just interrupt you. I do get paid sometimes, and people do promise to pay me and they don't pay me. And then I do a lot of charity work, used to do a lot of charity work. So yeah, so I love all of it. I'm sure you do too. I mean, your eyes are still open. Like, oh my God, I thought I knew something about that and I don't, and now I know more. So it's all about the energy, I think. It's all about the knowledge you're going to reap from this. So it's sort of a semi-college education. I don't want to downplay college education, but it is. It's what is that? My career is life, So that's what I do. So you're doing this too. You're doing the same thing. Right, and I think we can agree that when we say college education, no, like, insult meaning to people currently in college, but our education back in our day when we went to college was a lot different than it is today.
It was pretty straightforward, I think. My daughter's going to school for her master's, and she's gotten a background in economics. This is just a quick example. And then she's going to go for an accounting degree. And then a few years later, she's going to go for a law degree. Oh my God. I mean, yeah, she's shooting for the stars and she's doing well. But a lot of these kids don't know that you can go to a conference and meet the right people. They say, oh, we're going to have a career conference. And you get to look at all these different job opportunities. So while we talk, I'll tell people, this is where you want to go to find out this. This is where you want to go to find out that. I swear to God, the conferences are an open book, and don't go to one, go to 100. So if you're looking for a great job and a great paycheck, that's where you want to go to meet the right people, because they're sitting down at a table at that chair, and it's a great opportunity.
I agree. And not to sidetrack anything, but I want to ask you a question about something from your bio that I think, I'm not sure if you get asked a lot, and that is, at age 6, you had a near-death experience where you were drowning and you met an angel. What was it like to meet an angel, and how did you know it was an angel?
So a lot of people, I'll just interject this by saying a lot of people have different experiences. So I was with family, and a lot of family, like 30 people at a lake in Virginia, and they weren't watching the little ones. So I was 6 and we were very little. I was very petite at the time. And we went swimming, and I guess you know how you walk down into the deep, just like Virginia Beach, you walk into the water and it drops. And the next thing you know, I'm sinking and sinking. And I thought, I'm drowning because I'm drinking water instead of oxygen. And the next thing you know, it didn't happen quickly, to be honest with you. The next thing you know, this woman comes up to me and she is in all white. And then eventually these wings come out from her back. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I died. You know, basically I'm screwed. And I thought, okay, so the angel's coming to get me to take me to heaven. And she's talking to me. And it was both telepathy and it was also, it's not your time. And so she sort of brought me back up very slowly to where the land was so that I could, she actually pushed me up like right close to the shore. And I came out crying, talking to one of my relatives. So how did I know it was an angel? A lot of light behind her. The dress was in like a Greek look or Grecian look, Roman era time frame. And she, there's nothing, you know, I don't recall what color hair, but the lighting was all around her as if she had an energy, as if she had a knowing that this was her job and she had to take care of it. And that was it. Boom, done. And it was enlightening. And I thought, okay, I won't do that again. So in the future, when I went swimming, I was very cautious. Did you have any experiences when you were young?
I had an experience when I was 2
Mm-hmm.
where I was pulled into a vent shaft on a 2-story home and landed on the basement. And it was wintertime, so I was in my winter jacket and everything and fell from 2nd story past the 1st story to the basement with no broken bones, no bruises, no torn ligaments or tendons or muscles. Everything was good, except for I had a mark on my eyebrow where a wire clipped my eye, and no hair grows in that spot. So I have a little bald spot on my eyebrow as a little reminder. And later on in life, I found out, similar to you, is I saw a lady in the light. I'm assuming it was a lady, but a being pulled me from another being, and we had a nice little chat about, you know, the future, what is going to happen, what do I need to do to be prepared, when do I want to start the process of preparing, and then hitting the basement, it's like, I literally will say I was pulled out of time because the amount of conversation we had would not have happened on a fall from in a shaft from 2nd floor to basement in a home. I mean, it'd be different if I was in like a high-rise building or something where the floors are really tall, but no, this was a house. And looking back at it, it just amazes me at 2 years old how I could have that conversation.
Well, you know what's even more amazing is you understood her and you grasped the concept of what she was saying. That's what I find very interesting. I mean, 2 years old are you mentally developed that way? Maybe you were already mentally developed that way and didn't know it. I definitely, there's a thing called synesthesia, which apparently I have, and it could be you have synesthesia, and it's a part of the brain that is turned on, and only 4% right now of the world has synesthesia. And I've noticed certain people have certain characteristics. And when you and I have been talking off and on, you know, texting, emailing, so forth, I've noticed that you're a ball of energy. And every time I turn around, weird things happen when I try to communicate with you. And I think, what is going on with this guy? And then I thought, okay, so he's working with not just paranormal, but random UFO stories and random ghost stories or investigations. And that's highly influential in your energy, your personal energy. So this doesn't surprise me that you're telling us this great story. My first near death, I didn't have a long conversation. It was just blah, 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 and that was it. And then I acknowledged that I had to be more careful. But I mean, you're 6 years old and you have to be more careful. Give me a break. You should have adults monitoring you. Same thing with you. I mean,
Right.
why is a 2-year-old falling down this shaft, frightening?
Well, so the interesting thing, I'll interject real quick, is so my mom had put a board over the shaft opening.
Right.
And I feel like whatever, quote, accidentally pulled me into the shaft moved to the board, because it's like my mom was like, there was a board down. There was no way anybody could have fallen in this shaft. We don't know how that board was moved.
Right.
And a worker obviously wouldn't move it because, they're concerned about safety too.
Maybe, and there's so many, I call it the equation. Maybe the board was moved so that you could experience a little jarring of the brain. So almost like, screaming in the brain saying, wake up, and you woke up at age 2. I mean, that sounds a little weird. It's layman's terms of trying to describe what you went through, but that's a really interesting story. I'm sure a lot of the people out there are afraid to come forward and talk about their stories. This is the first time I've actually talked in depth about my NDEs. So you got the exclusive here,
Well, thank you for that. And
sure.
I also want to make clear that this is part of why I love doing paranormal investigating, is I only knew about my eyebrow growing up. And then when I hit my teenage years, then I found out, oh, yeah, I had this conversation. And then years later, I was on an interview where I was interviewing a lady in Greece. And she goes, well, there was 2 spirits there. And I was like, no. And so then it's like, and then my mom filled in later some pieces, like that she had put the board over it, that I was in winter clothes, that it was winter time. And so that's why I love paranormal investigating, is because you get these little pieces of puzzles and put it together and figure out this mystery.
It's very helpful to know all the pieces, but you have to unfold them. That's what's frustrating, because you don't know which direction to go in. And a lot of people say, oh, some of these ghost stories or investigations are fake. If they're a good crew, they're not going to fake anything.
Right.
Yay. If they're a good crew, they're going to try to make a plan. Sometimes your plan gets blown up, in your face, because you have these ghosties who are causing problems, or the other side causing problems. So, I think it's very, very complicated. And all you can do is put your best foot forward.
Right. So, and now that I think about it, growing up, I always would laugh with people because I would see out of the corner of my eyes these shadows and think nothing of it, and just be like, oh, some energy's out there being playful, no big deal. And it wasn't until I was on a paranormal investigation researching, and somebody goes, well, have you ever heard of shadow beings and what they are? And I was like, no, what's a shadow being? And then realizing that's what I grew up with. And everyone's like,
yeah,
you grew up with shadow beings? I'm like, well, doesn't everybody? It's like, it's like, that's what I love too, is in the communication and interaction, is to get people's reactions and going, wait, so that's not normal? Wait, what does that mean about me now?
Oh, yeah. I have met so many people who have not had a single experience, and they're frustrated. And then they hear people like us talking about it as if no big deal, no big deal. I mean, I think out of all the work I've ever done, I have dead people coming to my house. Do you remember the movie, The Sixth Sense, I believe it was? The kid goes, I see dead people. Well, right. At my house, dead people come to my house, and people guests have actually, they don't know who I am. And they come to the house and say, oh, you have a guest? They're on the deck. And I said, no, that's just somebody leaving. I don't even explain it. I mean, we've had a friend come over one time, and she said, Ginette, who's that good-looking guy on the deck? I said, and I finally told her name's Jane, and she goes, well, who's the other kid you're babysitting? I said, I'm not babysitting anybody because I'm not a babysitter. And she goes, no, there's a little girl running up and down the halls, and then goes back to Anna's room, my daughter's room. I said, that's a dead person. And she goes, what? I said, yeah, a lot of people that are dead don't know they're dead, and they go somewhere where there's an antenna up to people like you or myself saying, hey, I'll say hi and be nice and so forth. Receptors, if you want to call it that. And these people would come and go and be on my deck and be down the hall. I've had this new perimeter thing where I keep them outside of the inside of the house. Like say, I tell people, dead people, stay outside. But then people, my daughter's friends have come by the house, and I've heard this so many times, and it's really bothered them. They said, Mom, will you tell these people to stop coming? I said, they can't help it. I'm an antenna up, and they don't know where they are. They don't know what's going on. And I know that sounds like a random add-on to what you're saying, but you've got the shadow people or the beings, which is true. Heidi Hollis on another podcast show talks about it. She's written about it. And she's writing about the Hat Man. So there's lots of different entities out there. And I guess you and I are in the pudding of entities, good and bad.
Well, and the fortunate thing is, as much as we're in it, we also were taught and had the innate knowledge, or a good spirit came first and taught us how to protect ourselves. So we're not pushovers and vulnerable to everything. We know how to keep the bad ones out and keep them from coming in. And what I find challenging sometimes is because I feel like something was almost like a birthright, something known from birth. Mm-hmm. And then you try to explain it to someone and you're like, I really don't know how to explain it. It just happens. And I know that sounds horrible, like arrogant, but I'm like, that's the truth. It's like, I don't know how to turn something on. It just turns on.
Right. Sometimes it's like a car wreck. Boom, it happens. And then trying to describe it. Well, it was pretty quick, but blah, 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 blah. And then people don't comprehend what you're trying to say the whole time. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So shall we move on to my other near-death? Because we have limited time here, so I want to make sure your viewers say, about the escalation of abilities and talent that grows. I really have a feeling that our brain can turn on depending on your willingness to accept information. And like you did it at 2, and I did it at 6, and I did it again at 7. Shall I share my age 7 near death?
Right. Yeah, I'm interested in how you met your family from the other side and knew they were family.
Oh, that's when I was 27. So at 7, that was at 7. So at 7, I was injured and put to bed by the babysitter. And I'm in bed, and a man walks in the room, and I thought, they've called 911, or they've called the police, or they've called the doctor. And he gets closer, and he's wearing a ministry outfit. So he's wearing the all black and the little white thing that goes right here. I'm trying to point this out as best as I can.
Priest collar.
Pardon me?
A priest collar.
A priest collar. And it was a good looking guy. Probably he felt very tall. But again, I was 7, and he goes, Ginette, and I said yes, and he goes, I'm your father. And he wasn't my father in the sense of my biological father. And I said, oh, okay. I said, I thought you were the doctor. And he goes, no, I'm your real father. And so he goes, I'm going to take you on. He didn't say tour. I don't remember the exact words, but he said, I'm going to take you. I'm trying to fix this properly. Sorry that I keep going out of the view. I'm trying to fix that for you. So he touched me. First, he said he was going to heal me because I was cut up, sliced up, and I still have the scar. And my scar was in the head. It's about 4 inches long, maybe 5. And it's hard for me to grow hair there also, by the way. And he took my hand and took me into, maybe you want to call it another dimension or another time frame or a reincarnation time frame. And he actually took me to China, and he actually took me to Japan and showed me different lives I had been in and who were my relatives, and that I spoke Chinese, and another one, it was Japanese. And it was funny because we were flying. Now, as a 7-year-old flying, I guess I just thought, okay, I've got his hand like Mary Poppins, and I'm flying. And so we flew to China, and they showed me that he was a missionary and I was his child from being at that time frame. And he explained that there was a huge war going on in China, and he gave me a lot of details, and he showed me the building I lived in, and everything felt very familiar. And what's really weird, I decided later in life to do research on it, never told anybody. And I found out that in around 1912, don't quote me the timing, 1917, something like that, China was in a huge war. And they did kill a lot of the missionaries. And I pulled up pictures of the locations because I knew we were on the top of a hill. And I know that I recall in that life, he was showing me I was on a wagon and it was pulled by a donkey. And I thought, okay. And it just lots and lots of details. Then he took me to Japan and said, your real father was selected because he's going to teach you, because he didn't get to teach you enough. He's teaching you in this life because you died in the other life at a young age, around age 5, 6, or 7. And so they were showing me the Japanese writing. They were showing me my grandmother, that I was living with both my grandparents, and that my father today, who's now deceased, was in my past life in Japan. And but my mother was not. It was a different woman. So they gave lots of details, and on the Japanese one also, and showed me the town I was living in on top of a hill. They said my parents were living in the city because that's where the money was. And I had to stay with my grandparents in order to help my parents make a lot of money. And then all of a sudden, I saw myself reading Japanese, and then blackness came. And then all of a sudden, I'm back. It's like I'm sucked back into today's world. And I thought, okay, so I'm reincarnation-wise, if you believe in it, I'm former Chinese or Japanese. Now, both scenes, I was a girl. I've never been shown being a boy. So, I mean, other people have had other experiences where they were, a boy, then a girl, and vice versa. So that one was super interesting. But the final outcome on that one was really cool because they said your whole life will change at 27. So they showed me a bunch of information that was going to come forward. And I held on to the age of 27. I thought it was, in my mind, I kept thinking, well, is that good? And then I had another near death at 27.
Before you go to 27,
mm-hmm.
I want to ask if you ever noticed these near death or the death in your past life was 6 or 7. And in this life, you had near death experiences at 6 and 7.
Yeah, I just don't know what the correlation is because we can only go on the information and we don't have enough proof. It's like people say, oh, aliens exist. Okay, so what? We can't prove anything. All we can do is tell our story and say, this is what happened. I get it. I understand. Yeah, it is interesting. Very interesting. Yep. Yep. So
for interrupting, but so back to age 27.
Yep. So at 27, I was injured in a car wreck, had to go to the hospital. I was also, oh no, that was 2. I'm sorry. So originally I was sick and I had to go to the hospital. And apparently my kidneys were collapsing. And I went through the ER, was admitted to the hospital, and I know somebody was there. I don't know that it was a tunnel. I just know somebody was there in the room with me, and I had to go with them. I don't recall it. I don't want to say it happened quickly, but I went to the other side and was given lots and lots of stories, lots of education. Got to go to meet people in heaven, and I was surrounded by all these people that kept saying, "I'm your grandmother, I'm your sister, I'm your brother," and some of the people were talking in foreign languages, and I didn't understand a word they were saying. But what was interesting was one woman came forward and she goes, "I'm your grandmother," and she was Japanese, and I thought that was super interesting. I didn't feel threatened or afraid, but it almost felt like I was there for a year. Time goes very quickly on the other side. And I came back and I actually called my dad and I said, "Ooh, I think I died." And so we talked about it and I gave him all the details. What was interesting was when the doctor came in, she finally came in, little did I know I was in the hospital 14 days from kidney failure. What was interesting is she goes, "Oh, our miracle little girl," which I was 27. And that was super interesting that she thought I was the miracle person, which I didn't understand. And then a nurse came by and told me, "Oh, well, you died and you came back. And the fact that you survived kidney failure was unusual." And I didn't tell her anything about the experiences or anything, but it did tell me my life was going to change, and I was to locate missing people, and I was to help people on Earth. But it's hard. The public's rough. They're very rough, very judgmental, and so there's all sorts of stories that go from that. But within a week, I was in a car wreck and back in the hospital, which wasn't any fun, and had a concussion. So it took me almost a year to recuperate from that concussion. And but during that year, I kept meeting paranormal people in all sorts of categories. And I got to meet, there was a particular group that had a lot of conferences. And you go to the conferences, the Fortean organization. And Phyllis she'd run the show and she was fantastic. And you would get to see all these different platforms from Ghosty. And what was even better was you had PhDs coming in telling their story and sharing what they did from the standpoint of research. And so that was awesome. Yeah, so I tell people, go check out the Fortean organization and their conferences if you can. So very helpful. So was your age 2 your only experience that you had, or did you have more?
Actually, I think in my 30s, I had a couple near-death experiences. I don't remember if one was in my late 20s or if I'd actually crossed over, but that was the main one that I remember the most because it was like the most impactful to me and was like the most defined, like, yeah, from everything I had seen and heard and research fit the story.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was I'm very hot natured and I rarely get sick.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, it's like my bones started feeling like they were icing over. And I was like, I couldn't get warm. And I had layers on, 2 blankets on, still freezing. So I decided I'm going to go to bed, call my mom and say, may not be coming into work tomorrow. Something's off. She's like, okay, just keep us informed. We'll see how you're doing in the morning. Stay hydrated. I was like, all right. So I go into my hallway and I turn and start walking towards the master bedroom. And thankfully it's carpeted because as soon as I cross the threshold, the next thing I know, I'm on the floor looking up and being like, what's going on? And my chin hurts really bad. And I had a nick where it looked like there's a little bit of dried blood where I had hit, or maybe bruised, because there was no blood on the carpet.
Mm-hmm.
I had hit my chin on a full wood post of my bed, because my bed frame is total wood. And then I go into the bathroom because I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, something's weird is happening. And how I describe it is when they say like tissue regenerates from like being dead, it ejects the dead tissue.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I felt like happened. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to clean all that up. And it was like, without even thinking about it, it was like I was back to normal temperature, feeling totally fine, went to work the next day. But I also started to realize that I had started thinking about things in a different way, that my
Mm-hmm.
thought process had changed and my perspective of witnessing things had changed.
I think that when you meet the other side or these weird occurrences happen, that it's almost like you have a couple of books in your head that are just like a little chip, like a microchip put in your head saying, hey, listen up. And then through time, you can see little visions or information that comes to you that will help you understand what you went through. And then it flashes you back to the time when that situation happened. And it makes you more psychic and or more intuitive, whatever word you want to choose. And I just think it can escalate and escalate. And then you're going to be pushed into more experiences. And so you said you had one around in your 30s and you think you had a second one. And that's what amazes me, because I had another one at 37. And I just keep thinking, did the other side do that on purpose to make sure that we are A, possibly sane, B, wake us up, D, help other people? I mean, there's so many possibilities. I have just found every time I had those, I hope I don't have any more experiences like that, but my last experience at 37 was on the operating table. And I will share that real quick because we don't have a lot of time, but when you fell and you went to the restroom and you had to clean that up, there is something with almost like you said, a different dimension. You're flopping back and forth. When I died on the operating table, my circumstance was very weird because I was given an IV, passed out, and the next thing I know, I'm sort of waking up. I don't know if you call it theta state or delta state, but what was weird was this angel came down and I was being shown, like all above me was planets, stars, that kind of thing. A little far out, but she came down and she was screaming at me, or screaming, and she had wings and she was pushing on my right shoulder, and she kept saying whatever she was saying sounded Russian, but it wasn't Russian, and all this beautiful music came with her, and she was screaming, and then she was pointing up, and I said, I don't understand you, I don't speak that language. And she finally says, I'm helping you survive. And she said, I need a bunch of other people to come down and help me. And they kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me, pushing on me. And what was weird was I was actually feeling like I was floating out of my body. Then I looked down and I saw my body being operated on. And apparently the doctor that was doing the oxygen, he was stealing oxygen. And so the anesthesia. And so he would steal it. He'd give the patient enough to knock out. And then when they were doing surgery, you would either survive or not survive. And this was at Sibley Hospital in DC. And what had happened was, I guess he took a lot of my anesthesia and I was feeling the surgery. And so these angels kept coming down, and one was on one arm, another was on my another arm. Then I had some of my legs. And they just kept pushing me down and screaming in English, finally, with music going on. It was sort of a funky music. It took me a long time. I did research to try to find the music, and I found it, which was great. It sounded like, again, like it was Russian music. And I did come back, and I finally, I had one thing that was interesting. I'll just say this was, I heard the nurse say, "Why is she having tears? You know, why are tears coming out of her eyes? Because you're under anesthesia." And she goes, "Something's wrong here. Something's wrong." Well, the next thing you know, I pass out. You know, I'm out of it again. And I finally get to my bed, and the doctor comes in and tells me, "You died on the operating table. Are you okay? How do you feel about it?" I said, "I'm fine. You saved my life. Yay." And it wasn't my original doctor that came to tell me that. And they did not tell my husband. And he said, well, they didn't tell me. And I said, "Well, they told me." And he did say to me, which was really interesting, are you going to sue us?" I said, "Why? You saved my life." And then 10 years later, I'm looking in the newspaper. This is really critical. And here's an article about a time frame at Sibley Hospital in DC where people had died, and they had a class action lawsuit against Sibley and a particular doctor who was stealing the anesthesia, and people had actually died. And I thought, oh my God, that's when I was there. That was the doctor that was there. And so that's why I died, because he was stealing anesthesia, and I came back. But I do believe that particular near death really increased my psychic ability. It really did. But I was welcoming it, so it was fine. I accepted it. Like you said, you it is what it is, kind of thing.
Right. And I think it's kind of interesting how, like you were saying, everybody's is different. Like, I always attributed mine to like that movie City of Angels, where the angels knew the language and could speak, and it's like I could understand what they were saying and could communicate with them.
Mm-hmm.
And how you were sitting there saying, "Wait a minute, I don't understand you," and being like, it's interesting how the other side can talk in a way that we don't understand, but yet understand because, like you were saying, you weren't feeling threatened, you weren't feeling, in trouble. You just wanting to know what's going on and to understand who they were.
There was a lot of panic from the angels that they were trying to push me back in my body. And I think they said something like, "It's not your time." So I do think that's very helpful, because I'm sure a lot of the people that have had near deaths have been told it's not your time, or you'll get information that can help you when you talk to people about it that will help them understand. Because a lot of people are afraid to die. And I tell people now, you feel like you're still breathing. It's not painful to die. So if and when you get to that point, it's almost like you go to sleep and then you wake up in another dimension. And so it doesn't, you're still you still exist. And wherever you go, depending on the person, I mean, I've been fortunate enough, all mine were positive, like heavenly, as you know, you could say the word heavenly. But if other people have said, no, they went to hell and they woke up, and was it Dan and Brinkley said he went to hell or something, and they woke him up and they said, "You better straighten up," and he straightened up, which I think is super interesting.
Yeah, I think it has to do with where you are in your life and what you're meant to do. And I like to say, when my guys are trying to get a hold of me, and if I'm not responding, how some people go, "Do I need to hit you with a 2x4 to, wake you up?" And I'm like, my guys do the cosmic 12x12. It's like,
yeah, oh yeah,
wake me up.
Yep. My dad used to say that. I can't believe you said that terminology. Do you want to be woken up by 2x4? Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I do think that, again, a lot of people are going to have experiences that in multi directions of, oh, I met a ghost, or I saw a ghost, or I saw an alien, or I saw a spaceship. A lot of people get overly excited when that happens. I don't get excited. I'm like, okay, well, there's an alien. Ooh, there's a spaceship. Ooh, what are you going to do? Jump up and down? That's not going to change things. They exist. Okay. I think though, out of all the things that we have to deal with, I think the one fascinating thing that I haven't seen a solution to, and I haven't seen all the options, is the Bigfoot story. You know, that's one category I'm not in, but I do find it fascinating. I really enjoy watching the shows, trying to find him and the characteristics and the outcomes, and they still can't solve it. You know, it's the never-ending story.
See, I when it comes to Bigfoot, I'm a firm looking at, like, all the pictures are blurry, or it's only you hear, you don't see, and I sit there and I think about it, and how my mind wraps around it, going, well, if you're jumping from portal to portal, going from dimension to dimension, any object in between the portals is blurry because it's moving at a different speed we are, hence blurry photos.
Right.
And then I was like, well, but then what about sound, that we don't see them, and going, well, he could be like yelling or talking or communicating to someone through the portals, and the sound comes out after he's gone, and that's why we hear but don't see.
Have you ever seen it where they have a show on right now, and the team is very educated, which is great, and experienced, and they have some really good equipment that shows heat sensors, and they've actually picked up the object, blurry as it is, walking into the forest, walking over to the creek, that kind of thing, which I think is fantastic. I think we're going to have more and more excellent pieces of equipment to define things for us. But it's just one of my fun things that I get fascinated about. Everything else, I understand it. I get it. I'm just like, okay, that was scary, or that was what do we do with that scenario,
Right.
But
and it's kind of interesting. I just thought about something too, is I don't know if you're into sci-fi, like Star Trek. The Next Generation had an episode where they were out of phase, and they could interact with everybody on their side of the dimension, but they're walking on our dimension, but they can't interact with because they're out of phase and had to come back into phase. And so I wonder if, now I'm thinking about it, going, I wonder if Bigfoot has the ability to phase.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, a lot of this stuff is again, it's hard to describe, and we'll do a sidebar and jump back into my work. I didn't mean to bring up Bigfoot, but I'm still fascinated by it, because my specialty is locating missing objects and missing persons. And somebody wrote me a note, well, if you're so good, why don't you find Bigfoot? And I thought, well, you be the boots on the ground, and I'll pinpoint the areas where he eats and sleeps and drinks water, and you go find him, and I'll be happy to do it. What's your offer? What's your compensation? And he said, well, if you do that, I'll offer you $10,000. And I said, yeah, sure. Well, he disappeared out of the woodwork. He just totally disappeared. I said, okay, I'll do the bet. But anyway, so that was a weird segue of the paranormal that I don't quite understand. The rest I do. I totally get it. But anyway, so I just wanted to cover a couple minor things with my work that we had talked about briefly with a little text back and forth, that I do use dowsing. And one thing let me fix this, get back this way. Yeah, sorry about the screen going all over the place. One thing interesting about missing persons is that you could be on target. I mean, totally on target. Like, for example, I worked on the Casey Anthony case, and I gave all these details. And people are thinking, oh, she faked it, or she knew the family, and the family told her details. No, I don't know the family, never met the family. And they even said, oh, Ginette had a map to the location. Nope, didn't have a map. I mean, so it really did happen. I mean, I got really nasty. I pulled up different sites, and people were saying terrible things about me. And I thought, oh, God, this is going to be the never-ending quarrel about the Casey Anthony case because a psychic was involved. But it was also that there were a lot of people with the anger and the trauma of that particular case. On the Chandra Levy case, it was a totally different feel. With that particular case, I was very lucky. I had connections with a friend who was a community leader, and he brought the FBI to my house, and I helped pinpoint the location. And in that particular case, I didn't go public on it because I knew that an MS-13 might have been involved with it, and there's no point in even going public at the time because they were dangerous, and they still are today. So each and every case you have to look at, you have to decide what are you going to do and where are you going to go, and you have to do a lot of planning. And I'll just say two of my other cases that were very interesting. One of my old cases just came to the forefront recently. Down at William and Mary, there was several killings via serial killer, and they had a lot of suspects. And I was asked to go down and find the two missing people that have still not been found. And I told them exactly. I actually met with the FBI and a detective down there. The family introduced me to the detective, and I was doing some work with DEA at the time, and he introduced me to some FBI agents who basically inferred I was crazy. And I said, "Oh, the remains of these two people are down here," and I explained it. It was off the Parkway, and they were called the Parkway killings. And what was really weird on that particular case is I said, it's a guy who barbecues. He doesn't live far away. There is military involved. And the interesting thing is it just came to the forefront because a DNA matched recently in the last 6 months, I think, of the killer to all the other people that got killed on the Parkway. I mean, so the case was 30, let's see, I was in my 20s. So it's about 35 years later, all of a sudden this pops in out of nowhere. And I tell people that's what's going to happen. Every case you work on, everything you do, my first word is be careful, because it's not a big deal when you work with the FBI or the police. They're not always receptive, and they don't always welcome you. And you have to be very aware of what you say carefully. So I just wanted to mention that for people that want to get into missing persons. The better way is to go in, if you're a person who has skills, just go in and help and do search and rescue. That's the better avenue, because if you try to knock on their door, they're going to look at you like, oh, you killed the person. I mean, they will look at you in a different light.
I agree. And so one thing I want to ask real quick is, how did you determine dowsing for finding treasure? Because I would never have thought about using dowsing to find a treasure.
I had a dream one night. I do a lot of research myself and a lot of practicing myself. And I went to bed one night and they said, wake up. And I'm asleep. And it kept saying, wake up. Now, not wake up, but wake up and go do treasure hunting. And I was a dowser, and there is a group called the American Society of Dowsers, and they have annual conventions, and they have what's called chapter conventions. And just the other side told me, use your dowsing to find treasure. And I found treasure in Illinois, Southern Illinois, for a client. And it turned out to be he gave me a choice of what cases I wanted to work on. So this was what was really interesting. And I know you have to go, so I just want to say this one was really fun because it was an Al Capone case where Al and his buddies, I think it's Frank Nitty. Am I saying that right? I think it's Frank. Anyway, his name was Nitty, Nitty, I believe. They robbed a government truck and stole treasury, from the Treasury Department. And what was interesting is when my client came out, we sat at a table and he laid down some maps because he gave me 30 cases, and he told me this possible story of the the government bank robbery truck. And I said, I want to do that one. And he laid down the map, and I touched the map. And when I did, my fingers burnt, like somebody taking a cigarette to my finger. And I looked at my hand real quick, and I literally thought I was burnt from something, because the people I was talking to were cigarette smokers. But oddly enough, there were no burns on my hands. So I said, let's work on that particular case because of the burn. So my mind is thinking, hot, the word hot, and you define it as, or translate it as, this is a hot area. This is the area. So we took the first map out, and I touched it. I took my hand and I put it over the map, and I kept feeling tingling and hot piercings on my fingers and palm. And I said, this is the case. So I pinpointed a site on the map, and then I said, what else do you have? Do you have any better maps closer to that particular area? Which he did, which was great. So he had already had the really good topo maps, and he had other maps. Back then you didn't have, this was in the late 80s, you didn't have the Google Earth opportunity. So he pulled out another map and laid it down, and I said, right here. I took my finger and I said, right here. And I got burnt again on my finger. And I thought, that's really painful. And I kept touching it, and I said, okay, right here. And then what I did was I said, there was a road there, and I said, I want you to park right here. And then I used dowsing to guesstimate how far in they had to go. So I said 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. Anyway, the pendulum reacted, and it went to like 20 feet. I'm just guesstimating. And I said, stop there and do a radius, not a round radius, but do a 10 by 10 area and peg it off with flags. And when you do that, you'll pick up with, they had the ground penetrating radar. It looks like a lawnmower, vacuum cleaner type thing. And so when they did go out finally 2 years later, they called me from the site. They called me from the actual metal detecting time frame. And they said, we're out here, but we didn't find anything. We did find something, but it doesn't make sense. And I said, well, just tell me what you found. And because they said, we didn't find anything. And I said, get clear on what you did find. And he said, well, we dug 2 feet and we found the hood of a truck. And I said, what? And I said, what year is the hood of the truck? And he goes, 1930s. And I said, I was rude. I said, look, stupid. Why would the hood of a truck be in a farm field in the middle of nowhere from the 1930s in the ground 2 feet down? There's something to that. Because, and I'll tell you another story real quick, but I said, pull it out and then use the ground penetrating radar and do it again. So they pulled it up and they used the ground penetrating radar, and it reacted heavily. And they dug 4 more feet, and they found over 60 bars of silver stolen from the federal government. So that was really cool, So, yay. So my father had one of the bars, and I said, what we need to do, and I told the treasure hunters, I said, don't sell them, don't smelt them, go to the press, tell them what you found, because it's a great story, and it could be a great movie because it's based on truth, factual. And they were like, no, we're gonna smelt it. I said, you're gonna make more money from a movie deal than smelting it, because it's only silver. And I said, secondly, can you imagine the steps of you're finding this? And they were marked, they were labeled U.S. government. They had a number on them, and they smelted them. They didn't want to move forward. They didn't want the press. And I said, all you do is go get a media person to help you to get involved with the whole process.
So they got it smelted. I would think somebody be turning that in, stamped U.S. government.
I said, the government's going to have a reward too. And people call me all the time on treasure hunting, and I tell them, where are you going? Is it government land? I mean, I've had people I had to turn away. They're on, they want to hunt on Indian land. Can't do that. National parks, can't do that. Cornfields, absolutely yes. I just got a call from a cornfield, for a job on a cornfield. I was like, that might work. So we'll see. But so my dream told me to go do the dowsing work. So I do a lot of dream work, and I assess the job and say, based on the dream work, I'll get told information and I'll say, okay, I don't think your project is going to come to fruition. I mean, a lot of people call and say, I'm working on this big project. What do you think? And I said, oh, okay, pay me $250. I'll assess it and I'll let you know. And then if it can work, you can pay me to do the location work. But assessing a project is the best way to do it, because if it's a dead end, it's a dead end. And for example, I'll just wrap this up by saying I had a client in Switzerland, really great guys, and they brought in 30 jobs, just approximately. And I kept dowsing and using questions, show me the locations of the treasure. Nothing. All 30 cases, nothing. I couldn't find anything. And it's better to go ahead and tell the truth than to make stuff up. So on one of the maps he finally sent me, I said, well, there's something here, but I don't get that it's worth a lot of money. I don't get gold. I don't get silver. I'm just getting, it's important. So he finally went out. I told him where to park, just like the Al Capone case. And I said, I want you to walk like 20 feet. I don't say 20 feet on every case, but I was just giving an approximate. And I said, stop right there. And on that particular one, I said, take your metal detector and I want you to do a 5-foot area and look for something right there. He did. So he's in Switzerland, calling me from Switzerland while he's in the field, and I'm in Richmond, Virginia. And he called me back and he said, okay, we found these items and they're from the Dark Ages. So he was going to donate them to a museum, because what are you going to do with that? It was pieces or tools and that kind of thing. So it wasn't any gold or silver. So treasure hunting, you never know what you're going to find. So dowsing can find anything. I mean, a couple of new cases I got, they're robberies, family heirlooms buried, guns, rifles, that kind of thing. Still back in the 1800s and 1930s, people still hid money on the property. The United States has got a lot of money buried. It's out there. So
I know. And if you find a mason jar, you probably are in luck, because that was I understood to be, especially in the 1900s, was the popular way to store the coins and everything and bury was put the jar in the ground.
Yeah, well, they did absolutely. They did a lot of people used a leather pouch, and sometimes they're disintegrated or just partially there, but they're still there. So everybody, go out there with that metal detector. Go get your metal detector. And I tell people, you want to meet a great group, go get a metal detector. Don't go shoot people. Get a metal detector. Join the great club. Don't waste your time on other clubs that are wacko. It'll be a lot more fun and safe.
Yeah, especially if you do it right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Love the paranormal. It's you combine the two, and your subject matter and the paranormal or parapsychology, and it can be very successful. Plus, you get to meet some really great people. Again, you do have to be careful on your boundaries with some of these people, because you meet some really crazy people. So there we have.
So we definitely need to get you back on to talk more about this dowsing and your true crime and missing people and artifacts, because that sounds really fascinating as well. And so I would love to have you back on.
Thank you. Do you want me to give out my number so people can reach me? Would that help?
I was just about to say, how can people reach out to you?
So, okay, my email is reach, REACH, Ginette, GINETTE, @gmail.com. Reach Ginette, GINETTE, @gmail.com. And my phone number is 571-358-1444. 571-358-1444. And I do tell people, if I don't pick up, it's because I get so many scam calls. You've got to leave a message. And if you don't hear from me in 2 or 3 days, it means I didn't get your message. So send a second email or second message, but always leave a message. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Michael.
Yes, thank you for coming on. And I'm the same way with phones. I'm like, if you don't leave a message, I just clear it out and move on because I'm like, I don't know who you are. I'm sorry. I don't memorize phone numbers anymore.
Yeah, the new word, spam, spam, spam. Actually, a couple of clients did call me and it said spam, and I just happened to pick up, and they turned out to be great clients. But now I have a new policy, leave a message. So, but it was great to talk to you, and we'll talk again. And you pick the platform, and I'm with you.
Perfect. Sounds great. And real quick, one last question I like to ask because you have such a vast background and everything. What is a golden nugget that you would like to leave the audience with?
I would say pay attention to what you're seeing. So let's say you're doing dishes, ladies or gentlemen, and all of a sudden you get this picture in your head and you don't act on it. Sometimes it can be a picture to help people, to save yourself from somebody coming to shoot you, or someone to come rob your house. Pay attention. Whenever you're around water, for some reason, it's an increased perception level. We certainly have different dates with biofeedback and astrology that can tell you your different dates of intuition is increased. So I tell people, go check out astrology for fun. It's very complicated, but it doesn't hurt to get an astrology reading, and they'll give you the dates that are very important. But pay attention, and you could save your own life. I mean, I've saved lives by telling people, hey, I see you in the car, and you're going to the bank. I gave the date, time frame. I told her the bank. I told her the road the bank was on. Let's say it was Bank of America on Hill Street. And I said, you're going to go to the bank at 11 o'clock and you're going to get robbed. No, I'm not. And I said, okay, fine. Well, it happened. And she called me telling me that she actually survived it. Because I said, what you do is you roll up your car window and you back up because nobody else was there. And she said the lights were out. And that saved her life, that she remembered what I said. So a lot of people, please pay attention to you can call them a vision, you can tell them intuition. Pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. It's really awesome. There's some great books out there. I recommend people to pull up 10,000 Dreams, interpreted by Gustav Heinemann Miller. It defines what does your dream mean. It can tell you if you're going to win the lottery. It can tell you if you're doing great. It can help you with your career. Those are some of my favorite pieces. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're at that time where we are going to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. Make it a blessed day. Fill it with love and light. And like Ginette says, pay attention to the signs that are around you. You never know what it could mean. And so don't discount. Pay attention and trust your instincts on it. And with that, we are going to say good night.
Bye, everybody. All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Bye-bye.